Picture this. November 11th, 1943, dawn breaking over Bougainville Island in the Solomon Islands, and the jungle mist is hanging so thick you can barely see 20 feet ahead. Staff Sergeant Thomas Callahan is pressed against his Springfield rifle. I lock to his scope, and in his left hand he's holding something absolutely ridiculous. A beat-up Campbell's chicken noodle soup can with both ends cut off and a little hole punched in the side. Now, if you told any military expert back then that this dented piece of trash would become one of the deadliest weapons in the Pacific Theater, they'd have laughed you out of the room. But Callahan wasn't laughing, he was hunting. 700 yards across that cleared killing ground, Japanese positions were dug in deep, and he'd spent all night calculating angles, planning his move. At exactly 5:47 in the morning, that soup can caught the first ray of sunlight and sent a brilliant flash of light straight across the jungle, aimed right at a cluster of palm fronds hiding a Japanese observation post. For 2 seconds, the light held steady. Then Callahan shifted the stick by 1 inch and the beam moved. Now, curiosity is a funny thing. It doesn't care if you're in the middle of a war zone. 700 yards away, some Japanese soldier just had to know what that strange flashing light was all about. He shifted position to get a better look, exposing his head above the sandbags for maybe 3 seconds. Callahan's rifle spoke once, and the observer fell. That was kill number 1. And before this week was over, Sergeant Callahan would use variations of this absurd soup can trick to eliminate 112 confirmed enemy combatants, completely revolutionize Marine Corps sniper doctrine, and drive an entire Japanese regiment into such psychological chaos that his battalion commander would later call it the most ingenious psychological warfare operation of the entire Pacific campaign. What started as desperate improvisation with empty ration cans would transform into a systematic killing method that the Japanese had absolutely no answer for. The mathematics of death were being rewritten, not through bigger guns or more soldiers, but through pure human ingenuity applied to literal garbage. Now, Callahan's journey to Bougainville started 6 months earlier back at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. He was a farm boy from rural Montana who'd enlisted in 1941 at 19 years old, just days after Pearl Harbor like so many young men back then. Growing up hunting mule deer and elk in the Bitterroot Mountains had given him this instinctive understanding of ballistics and wind drift and patience that no military training could ever replicate. His company commander, Captain Harold Morrison, noticed something different about him during a routine rifle qualification in March 1943. While other Marines were firing away conventionally, Callahan took an extra 15 seconds before each shot, compensating for a crosswind that most shooters completely ignored. He scored 48 out of 50 at 300 yards with just iron sights. Morrison pulled him aside afterward and asked if he'd hunted before the war. Callahan said elk mostly, some deer, about 700 yards with his daddy's rifle and iron sights. 3 days later, Callahan got orders to scout sniper school at Camp Pendleton, California. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper program in 1943 wasn't just about shooting, it emphasized intelligence gathering and psychological impact over pure marksmanship. Gunnery Sergeant William Henderson taught the psychology module, and he'd tell every class that killing the enemy is a last resort. Your real job is intelligence. You watch, you report, but when you do shoot, you make it count in a way that creates maximum psychological impact on the survivors. Callahan absolutely excelled at this mental game because growing up hunting in Montana had taught him that elk could stand motionless for hours, then vanish at the slightest wrong movement. He applied that same patience to stalking exercises. The final exam required students to stalk within 200 yards of instructors with binoculars, and Callahan completed it in 9 hours. The instructors never even saw him until he stood up and waved after making his shot. Henderson pulled him aside after graduation and told him he was good, really good, But he was thinking like a hunter, and the Japanese weren't elk. They adapt, they learn patterns, and the sniper who survives isn't the best shot. It's the one who never does the same thing twice. Callahan deployed to the South Pacific in July 1943, assigned to 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Division. The landing at Empress Augusta Bay on November 1st involved 14,000 Marines, and by November 3rd they'd established a defensive perimeter. Callahan's first week was conventional infantry combat against light but determined Japanese resistance. Then on November 8th, tragedy struck. His spotter, Corporal James Rivera, was killed by a Japanese sniper while conducting reconnaissance. Rivera had raised his binoculars for 3 seconds to identify a target, and the Japanese sniper, concealed in a tree platform 600 yards away, made a perfect headshot. Callahan spent 30 minutes completely motionless, processing grief and rage in equal measure. He studied the jungle, analyzing angles, calculating positions, and rather than calling for artillery or attempting immediate revenge, he withdrew, carried Rivera's body back to friendly lines, and requested permission to hunt that Japanese sniper using unconventional methods. Captain Morrison, desperate to reduce casualties, agreed. That night, sitting in his foxhole, Callahan studied the problem from every angle. The Japanese sniper had perfect concealment. He couldn't spot him with binoculars. Direct assault was suicide. Artillery would be wasted on one man, so he needed to force that enemy sniper to reveal his position without exposing himself. As Callahan ate his evening sea ration, chicken noodle soup heated over a fuel tablet, inspiration struck in the most unexpected way. The can, opened with his P-38 can opener, caught the last rays of sunset and sent this brilliant reflection flashing across his foxhole. Callahan stared at that can, then at the jungle, then back at the can, and 15 minutes later he was explaining his wild idea to Morrison. Morrison asked if he seriously wanted to use soup cans as bait, and Callahan corrected him, not bait, distraction, confusion, because the Japanese train to spot movement, sound, muzzle flash, but they don't train for random light reflections, and if he could make them curious enough, they'd shift position to investigate, and that's when he'd shoot. Morrison thought about it and said he'd need multiple cans at different positions to create a pattern they couldn't ignore. He approved the mission, and Callahan would work with a security team of 4 riflemen to demonstrate the technique on targets of opportunity before attempting to hunt the specific sniper who'd killed Rivera. November 9th saw the first real test. Callahan positioned himself 300 yards behind the front lines, overlooking a clearing that Japanese troops used to move between positions. He'd spent 2 hours before dawn planting 5 soup cans on stakes at various positions, each one angled to catch the morning sun just right. At 6:15, the sun rose and Callahan, working methodically, adjusted each can using a string system he'd rigged, creating specific light flashes aimed at Japanese positions. The first flash lasted 3 seconds, then darkness, then 30 seconds later a flash from a completely different position. For 20 minutes, absolutely nothing happened, and then a Japanese soldier emerged partially from the tree line, trying to locate the source of these mysterious light signals because he assumed American forces were using mirrors for tactical communication. He raised his binoculars to investigate, and Callahan's shot struck him in the chest at 480 yards. The Japanese soldier fell, and Callahan immediately withdrew, moving 300 yards south to a completely different position while the soup can stayed behind, still creating random flashes. 30 minutes later, Japanese mortar fire absolutely saturated the area where Callahan had been, over 50 rounds falling on empty jungle. That afternoon, Callahan refined his technique even further, punching small holes in strategic positions to create different reflection patterns, painting some cans with mud to dull certain surfaces while keeping others shiny, developing a remote adjustment system using string and simple pulleys. The evening briefing at battalion headquarters drew unexpected attention when Lieutenant Colonel Michael O'Brien listened with increasing interest to reports about this unconventional approach. O'Brien knew they'd identified at least 15 Japanese sniper positions in that sector, killing 3 to 5 Marines daily, and if this technique actually worked, they could turn the tables completely. He asked Callahan how many kills he thought he could realistically achieve, and Callahan considered it carefully, maybe 20 to 30 in a week if he could set up proper positions and if the Japanese didn't adapt too quickly. O'Brien made his decision right there. Callahan would have 5 days with a dedicated security team, and his only mission would be eliminating enemy snipers using whatever methods worked. Then after 5 days they'd assess effectiveness. November 10th began with extensive reconnaissance as Callahan identified 7 primary positions with clear sight lines to known Japanese positions roughly 400 to 800 yards distant, and each position required different soup can configurations based on sun angle, enemy positions, and available concealment. The first success came at 7:45 when Callahan had positioned 6 soup cans in a rough semicircle facing Japanese lines, and using his string system he created the specific sequence: flash from position 1 for 5 seconds, flash from position 3 for 3 seconds, and this pattern repeated 3 times. Through his scope, Callahan watched Japanese positions 640 yards distant, and after the pattern repeated enough times, 2 Japanese soldiers emerged from a concealed bunker entrance, clearly discussing these light signals. One pointed toward the soup can positions, the other raised binoculars, and here's the brilliant part: Callahan had positioned himself 90 degrees off-axis from the soup cans, creating perfect ambush geometry where the Japanese soldiers were focused entirely on the can positions, never imagining the real threat came from the flank. His first shot hit the soldier with binoculars, the second shot hit his companion, both clean kills at over 600 yards. By November 10th evening, Callahan had achieved 9 confirmed kills using variations of the soup can technique, and Japanese forces trained to detect conventional threats had absolutely no doctrine for handling weaponized distraction. November 11th brought the encounter that would define the entire operation when Callahan identified a particular Japanese position that appeared to house their primary sniper, camouflaged in a large tree approximately 700 yards east of Marine lines and responsible for at least 6 American casualties. This Japanese sniper in that tree was exceptional. He never fired twice from the same position, showed perfect fire discipline, and Marine countersniper efforts had failed repeatedly. Callahan spent all of November 10th studying that tree and determined the Japanese sniper had at least 3 different firing positions in that single tree connected by concealed platforms. The challenge was forcing this skilled operator to expose himself because standard soup can techniques wouldn't work on someone this experienced who wouldn't investigate random light flashes. The solution came from understanding Japanese tactical priorities because their snipers were also intelligence gatherers who documented American positions, troop movements, and equipment. So what would force such a sniper to break concealment? Callahan developed what he called the command post gambit, where he positioned soup cans to create light patterns that mimicked American signal communication, but he added theater by having his security team move conspicuously carrying radio equipment, map cases, and other items suggesting a forward command post, then positioning his soup cans to create light flashes that appeared to signal between this command post and frontline positions. From the Japanese sniper's perspective, this was intelligence gold because a forward American command post conducting visual signal communication suggested vulnerability that had to be investigated. Callahan positioned himself 500 yards north of the fake command post with a clear line of sight to the suspected sniper tree. And at 9:30 he began his light show while his security team performed their roles perfectly, moving with purpose and appearing to coordinate defensive positions. For 90 minutes, absolutely nothing happened, and then at 11:15 Callahan detected movement in the target tree. A branch shifted slightly in a way inconsistent with wind patterns, and years of hunting elk had taught him to recognize these micro-movements that most people would miss completely. Through his 8-power scope, Callahan scanned that tree systematically until he found it at 11:23. A small opening in the foliage approximately 15 inches wide, positioned for a perfect view of the fake command post. As Callahan watched, the opening darkened slightly because someone had moved into position behind it. He made microscopic adjustments, controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, calculated that the range was 712 yards with wind approximately 8 miles per hour from the southeast, meaning he'd need to hold 2 feet right and aim 30 inches high to compensate for bullet drop. At 11:27, the Japanese sniper's rifle barrel emerged through the foliage, just 6 inches of steel, but enough to confirm the exact firing position. Callahan waited because patience wins these duels every single time. The barrel steadied as the Japanese sniper prepared his shot, and then Callahan fired. The 30-06 round arced through humid jungle air, 712 yards taking approximately 2 seconds of flight time, and the bullet struck exactly where Callahan had aimed, passing through that foliage opening and hitting the Japanese sniper in the head. Through his scope, Callahan saw the rifle barrel drop. Then a body fell through the tree branches, crashing through multiple platforms before hitting the ground with a thud that echoed across the clearing. Marines searching the position later that day found extensive sniper equipment and a logbook documenting 53 American casualties over 3 months, and they also found the body of a Japanese sergeant identified as one of the 6th Division's most experienced snipers. By November 15th, exactly 5 days after beginning the Soupcan operation, Callahan withdrew from the front lines with a final count of 112 confirmed kills, with observers verifying 97 of them. The intelligence assessment filed on November 16th documented unprecedented effectiveness, where Sergeant Callahan employed innovative deception techniques using improvised light reflectors and sound devices to force enemy personnel to expose themselves for observation and targeting, resulting in 112 confirmed enemy casualties, with 57 verified as sniper, observer, or communication personnel, 19 confirmed as officers or senior enlisted, an estimated 300 enemy man-hours wasted investigating false signatures, degraded enemy intelligence gathering capability by an estimated 60 to 70%, and significant psychological impact on enemy forces, with methodology meriting immediate documentation for potential wider implementation. Major Yamamoto's diary, captured after his death 3 days later, revealed the operation's devastating psychological impact, where he wrote that the American Demon Sniper had destroyed his battalion's effectiveness, with 23 men killed investigating inexplicable phenomena, officers afraid to expose themselves, soldiers refusing reconnaissance missions, morale completely collapsed, and inability to maintain defensive posture under these conditions. Thomas Callahan never returned to frontline sniper duties because by January 1944, he received orders to Camp Pendleton as a sniper school instructor, where for the war's remainder he trained over 400 Marine snipers, emphasizing creativity, psychology, and the importance of thinking beyond conventional tactics, with a teaching methodology that broke from traditional military instruction by presenting students with tactical problems and telling them the rifle is just a tool, your real weapon is creativity, because the enemy trains to counter known threats and your job is becoming an unknown threat they never see coming. Callahan survived the war without physical injury, was promoted to gunnery sergeant in March 1945, received the Navy Cross with a citation reading in part for extraordinary heroism and distinguished service while serving as a scout sniper, and left active duty in November 1945, returning to Montana, where he rarely discussed his wartime service publicly. In a 1978 interview, he reflected on the Soupcan operation by saying people focus on the kill count, but that's not what mattered. What mattered was showing that individual initiative could change outcomes, because the Marine Corps gave him a mission and trusted him to find solutions, and that trust, that willingness to let a sergeant try crazy ideas, that's what won the war. When asked if he felt proud of his achievement, Callahan paused and said he was proud they won, proud he helped Marines survive by eliminating threats, but not proud of killing because every one of those 112 men was somebody's son, maybe somebody's father, fighting for their country same as him, and necessary doesn't mean proud, it just means necessary. Callahan died in May 2003 at age 81 in Missoula, Montana, with an obituary that mentioned his Marine service but focused on his 40-year career as a high school teacher and coach, where former students remembered him as patient, encouraging, and always emphasizing creative problem-solving in everything he taught. The soup can trick lives on in military training and tactical literature, where modern military deception operations trace their conceptual lineage directly to Callahan's innovation. And while technology has advanced dramatically, the fundamental principle remains completely unchanged. Force the enemy to respond to false signatures, creating exposure opportunities that can be exploited with precision and devastating effect. Today, the original Springfield rifle Callahan used on Bougainville resides in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, displayed alongside 3 soup cans, dented and rusted, recovered from the battlefield in 2007. With a placard reading that these ordinary objects, transformed by extraordinary thinking, represent the innovative spirit that defined American fighting forces in World War II. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Callahan proved that success often comes not from having the best tools but from using available tools in the best possible ways, where 5 days from November 10th through 15th, 1943 witnessed a demonstration of individual initiative that changed doctrine forever, where 112 confirmed enemy casualties resulted not from superior firepower but from creativity applied to discarded trash. And in an era of smart weapons and precision-guided munitions, Callahan's story reminds us that the human factor remains absolutely decisive because technology amplifies capability but creativity defines possibility. And the Marine sergeant who turned soup cans into weapons of war proved that innovation matters more than equipment, that thinking beats spending every single time, and that sometimes the best answer to a complex problem is absurdly, beautifully, devastatingly simple.